fantastic presentation, Tim, and the whole theatrics of the moment is fantastic. You know, I suppose the length that you've taken it has been quite good. There's that idea, which is kind of new, I suppose, that an object can be something else if you put thought or you apply thought to it. Is that a central idea for this building? That somehow things that we're not too sure about, or things that have become residual or no longer required, are brought here, and somehow a new use is found for them.
Yeah, it dwells on the latent value within objects that are no longer are deemed to, or may only be deemed to have marginal value.
Okay, and it's operated by a person or a...
It is a public facility where perhaps archivists like the ones that we see in our archive room down here may go to, but it's also a place for the public, including families. Really, it's a place for the curious.
Okay, but it's also industrial, really, isn't it? It's industrial in that it takes a product and turns it into something, or it takes a raw material or something and turns it into a product, something that's useful.
Well, the object itself doesn't change. The only thing that changes is one's perception of it.
Yeah. Well, that it's got a function assigned to it, or becomes function.
When the function has been exhausted, a new function can be found, and it came from something that Benjamin talked about. He talked about the aura of a place or an aura of a thing, and he says it's something that's looking back at you. But what's really important is that, and it's also something that Robert Mercado was looking at in the 80s, where he said that they're actually open to new experience, perhaps in the arts or in other creative industries, rather than the one that they were originally assigned to.
Great.
Yeah, objects do have order. I think like you know more about this than I do. Do you think sometimes it has to do with what the object suggests to you that you already know?
Very much so.
Or is it clearing the whole room?
Yeah, that's the basis of phenomenology to some extent, that our experiences are already ingrained in some ways,
What's the scale of flexible here?
This molecule is 1 to 100, and you can see some people here.
Okay, so it's quite small.
Yeah.
What would be an example of one of them? It's programming in the abstract, so just as an example of something like
Yes, in that slide, in the second slide, there's some examples such as some TV buildings that in the 50s that were really taken up, but really it's also starting to take machines of being constructed within Newcastle and those that particularly don't have machines that are really don't perform the usage of all of that or the young people.
So does it become better for museums and researchers sense that we put?
Yes.
Yeah,
what I'm calling it is a temporal repository. So it stores items for however long they stay there. So an item might come here and leave, and an item might come here and sound something.
As you describe it actually coming out of the object, does a person with the things have a coming out as well?
Yes, I forgot to mention that. So they come in at a low deck at this level, and there's a deck here that you might not be able to see on the drawings, but you can see here. They transverse past all of these anodes, or they can go up these stairs here, or these stairs here. The intention is that they're never really seeing the images on the plates.
So that again.
They're never really seeing the images on the plates directly, so they must get up, they get on this platform which raises, which is only 1200 deep, so they're a certain depth. Each plate is 1200, large, so they're quite large. So there's a sense of vertigo that one has on these platforms, but also from up here, if say you see something there which you're curious about, there is this transversing up and down as well. They can also travel through a corridor here, which is in part for maintenance of the lenses, but in part it's a dark room with a red light, and these run at these stations usually before one comes to this entering or exciting object.
And the object is very skeletal. Is that because you haven't put the cladding in, or you don't anticipate cladding?
This will be clad. It was it pulls back the cladding. So this cladding here, which is brass, if you see it in reverse, it's mild steel from the outside. That's the external form. And this is what you would see from the other side of the harbour. So that would be clad, and the roof would be partially filled, except for around the fulcrum there.
And arriving there, are you imagining car parking or walking or?
I imagine it might be easy to show you in the handout that I gave you rather than getting the slide.
I can have a look at it.
Yeah, well, it shows the site plan, and essentially you'd need to go onto Carrington, which is an island in its own way, and then you need to go down Benson Street, which takes you to the ground silos, at which point you park there, and then you move through the vacated four-deck site to get to the building.
Well, a very beautiful presentation. I think it gives us also in the situation of looking at objects. Very nicely thought about that, apart from a little blurry bit, which I also actually think works quite well when you focus more. So, very nice presentation and intriguing. It's just something that's between a factory, as you say, something that's mechanical and a factory, and something that actually is part of something one can visit. It's not unlike the essence of the plastic recycling in another way, but with a different purpose and a different location. So yeah, very interesting, nicely put together, nicely explained, and look forward to seeing more of it. I hope. It's not one I think we'll be building much later.
No. But this is a model that I feel like I can continue building.
Yes.
The model, of course, goes into the place.
Yes.
The model is
Another of the object.
Is the object. See, that's what I find really beautiful about it.
It is.
And you've just totally occupied yourself with that. And the nice thing about the word object is that it's nothing to do with, well, it's the opposite to subject. Right? And somehow or other you've been able to isolate object. It's not an easy thing to do. You know, subject, verb, object, they go together. And one of the great issues with architecture today, I think, is that it has been totally, by many people, objectified, in that it has ignored the whole issue of the subject. And you have a preoccupation with it in a certain way that I find really interesting. You see, because it seems to me, as an outsider, and just being wonderfully confronted by this, is that you are really occupied by time. I would think, and I don't know you all that well, but I've had the pleasure of working with you a bit this year and other times. You always seem to be in more than one era at a time. Right? Which is fantastic. And then the whole issue of the philosophy of time, which has been that old chestnut that philosophers have thought about for centuries and come up with many, many, many ways of looking at it, from the Greeks to Dogen, the philosopher in Japan from the 13th century, who said the essence of time is the moment before something happens. It was when we sensed the storm coming tonight, but it hadn't hit. That's for him the essence of time. And so it goes right back to geological time. It's a really beautiful thing, and we're all passing wonderfully through it, right, coming and going. And through your architectural scheme, you've you've touched on that whole sort of issue in a really beautiful way. So I wonder where you're going to go with obvious, incredible ability, and I just look forward to seeing how you steer yourself. The final thing too is that what's striking me about many of these presentations is that Newcastle is in a great state of flux at the moment. The great industrial installations are going. The coal looks like it's on the firing line, thankfully, I think. But somehow or other, all the students at the Newcastle school are very occupied with this industrial overlay to this place, and you're coming to grips with it through your schemes. And I think that's a fantastic thing, and I'm sure it will lead somehow into Newcastle's future. Oh yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking over the last 5 years what we've said. You know, and there's a great lineage coming in here, and it's only happened here, I think. You know,
It's the new industry.
yeah. Well,
These guys are the new industry.
well, it's like Robert. What was his name? Robert Smithson. You know, saying rising into ruins. It is that sort of inversion of time and object and subject, and blah blah blah. And it was Lawrence Durrell in one of his books who said, why is it that the defunct industrial objects of the past become the most sought after objects of the present? You know, tat. Stores that sell this stuff. It's a curious thing. And
Nostalgic.
put your fingers and mind and everything into that.
Benjamin talks about it too.
Does it?
About the industrial world. Or romanticising.
Peggy,
Yeah,
quick.
Tim, I mean, the theatre behind your presentation is just remarkable. So thoughtful and engaging, Simon, and even your outfit. But what should be said, I think, which is really important, is the process you've been through. You have never stopped. You've never stopped thinking, you've never stopped looking, you've changed site radically, you've changed program radically, and you've produced something remarkable at the end of it. It's a great tribute to you. It really is. I went to a museum of torture in Siena, in Italy, and you walk down this wonderful inclined planes where an old ruin of an old castle. And you go up into this museum, and there's old torture objects, and their sort of archaic qualities is takes you on to another place. Unlike sort of a new Apple iPhone, right? There's something about being connected with the person, which is so romantic and so universal. And you stand in this museum and you look at these things and you just imagine what was going on. And I find your museum, or whatever it is, has that wonderful connection with people and being and invention and creativity. And it brings alive things that might have gone dormant. And actually, when you first told me about this, I thought it fills in all the shadows. You know, where the light is casting across the facades and the shadows that aren't seen or talked about. It's a wonderful thing, and the way you separate sort of the storage with the scene, you know, is a bold. It's a great move. It's a really great move, and then separate the buildings from the land. There's so much about this which is creative and highly talented. It's a fantastic thing. Good on you.
Well done.
I'll just say great. I can't add to that. It's fantastic. It's actually been a pleasure just to see them all. Well done, Greg.